The financial crisis has really shown how important it is to have a strong, healthy and competitive industry in Europe. We welcome the European Commission's plan to strengthen the industrial basis here in Europe, especially as Nickel, we are at the beginning of important value chains that are really critical to the European Union. Take energy, for instance. You will find nickel in every single wind turbine. From a transport perspective, nickel is a key component in batteries. And just at your daily life, nickel and stainless steel is used in household appliances, kitchenware, health applications. The financial crisis has really shown how important it is to have a strong, healthy and competitive industry in Europe. And we are not only talking here about the big players, we are also talking about small and medium-sized industries, which you find in a number of different industrial value chains, and which are really recognized as the backbone of the European economy. Manufacturing right now accounts for about 15% of Europe's GDP, but in the past decade we have lost quite a number of our workforce. So putting emphasis and priority on industrial policy is very important to maintain and grow the industrial competitivity, and especially because the industry here in Europe is competing at a global level. So while we believe that the communication of the European Commission does identify some critical issues, we are a little bit disappointed because it doesn't really describe how to tackle or to address these issues. It seems to imply more that implementation and enforcement of existing legislation is sufficient, but it thereby ignores the real concerns of the industry and also the framework conditions that are needed. So industry is calling for certain framework conditions, such as, for instance, planning security. Investment cycles in our industry are between 15 and 20 years. So it's very important for our companies, but also for the companies in our value chain, to know that the production and the use of our products can be assured over a longer period by the regulatory framework. At the same time, we also need clear rules in decision-making, both for industry and the regulators. We see companies investing in economies where the rules are much more clear, where there's much better predictability, and only if this is the case in Europe can we define a way forward. So finally, we also believe that upcoming legislation needs to be built on key principles. And from our perspective, these key principles are: first, decision-making based on sound science. Second, full life cycle thinking needs to be taken into account. And thirdly, socio-economic considerations need to be included into the decision-making process. There are a number of concrete actions that we have identified in order to improve the current situation. For instance, we see target conflicts as a major area of concern. Let me give you an example. Industry is required to reduce its use in energy, but at the same time there are stricter and stricter requirements with respect to permitting. There are more and more rules with respect to environmental protection, which ask for an increased use of energy. Such conflicts need to be identified, need to be discussed, and need to be resolved. A second point is, for instance, the scientific advice that needs to be maintained and even expanded at European level. Scientific advice has been implemented at the highest political level by Commissioner Barroso, so we would really urge that the role of scientific advisor be maintained and even replicated in the different Directorate Generals of the European Commission. And finally, it's essential to do impact assessments not only before a legislation is drafted, but also after legislation is implemented and enforced, to make sure that the legislation is delivering what it is meant to do. Such impact assessments need to take into account all dimensions, including life cycle thinking. We really believe that we are at crossroads here in Europe, and it's time for the European regulator to show that their words are being put into action in order to maintain and grow the industrial bases in Europe.